Hey guys! Tonight we're setting off under the quiet glow of a Greek night sky. Imagine yourself stepping into a soft, silver-painted landscape where the grass almost hums with moonlight and the air feels like velvet on your skin. You're not in a rush. You don't even have a destination. You just tilt your head back and notice her. Selene, the goddess of the moon, rising slowly, deliberately, like someone who knows the whole world is secretly watching. She's not hurrying for anyone. She's got the kind of confidence that comes from owning the sky. And sure, you probably won't survive this, by which I mean you'll fall asleep long before we're done. That's kind of the point. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is there. I love knowing if you're half asleep in Berlin at midnight or wide awake in Sydney at noon. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The sky is ink dark. And then, there she is, Selene. Not just a glowing orb, not a chalky circle with craters, but a goddess with eyes that gleam like polished marble. You can almost hear the creak of a silver chariot wheel, the low huff of her horses as they drag the night forward. Funny thing though, she's not so different from a night shift worker clocking in. Every evening, the same commute across the heavens. Just fewer gas stations, more stars. The ancient Greeks looked up at her with the kind of awe usually reserved for royalty. They believed Selene wasn't simply the moon, she was the moon, flesh and divinity wrapped in radiance. Her presence meant more than light. She marked time, guided farmers, and, according to some, nudged lovers into doing what lovers do best when the world is bathed in moonlight. There's a quirky little tidbit that ancient writers loved to argue about. How many horses actually pulled her chariot? Some say 2, glowing like twin candles. Others swear there were 4, manes burning with white fire. One poet even suggested winged horses, because really, why stop at regular horse physics when you're already lighting up the night sky? Folklorists can't agree if these details were symbolic. 2 horses for waxing and waning phases, 4 for the seasons, or just storytellers showing off. You imagine standing in a quiet olive grove, hearing the rhythmic clop of hooves above you. The stars are her audience, and you're lucky enough to have a front row seat. The silvery dust she leaves behind doesn't just coat the sky, it feels like it settles on your shoulders too, like a shawl you didn't realize you needed. Of course, every culture has its moon goddess. The Romans borrowed Selene and renamed her Luna, because apparently even gods get rebranded for new markets. But the Greeks' version feels especially human. Selene isn't some cold, distant deity. She's emotional, deeply tied to stories of love and longing. She feels less like a cosmic body and more like that friend who shows up uninvited to every late-night walk, spilling secrets you're not sure you're ready to hear. As the night deepens, you notice her silver path stretching across the heavens, steady and sure. And beneath it, you wander on, half dream, half story, knowing you're being quietly followed by a goddess who never skips her shift. Selene lingers above you. Her glow shifting, stretching, thinning, never the same twice. Tonight, she's a bold, round lantern. Tomorrow, maybe just a shy curve, a crescent like a fingernail scratch in the sky. You tilt your head and notice how her face seems to change moods, as though she's got a wardrobe full of disguises, and no one can agree which one's her real self. The ancients, of course, had their explanations. To them, the moon wasn't just wobbling through phases because of shadow and sunlight. It was Selene herself, adjusting, reshaping, slipping into different masks. A full moon meant she was showing up in her finest dress, radiant and impossible to ignore. A new moon meant she'd turned her back, sulking in the dark, like someone who just lost a board game and refuses to play another round. Funny thing though, you and I know the science, right? It's just the Earth, the Sun, geometry doing its neat little tricks. But tell that to a sleepy shepherd 2,500 years ago. They looked up and thought, well, obviously the goddess is having a mood swing. Honestly, it feels like a more relatable explanation. Geometry has never ruined anyone's crops, but a moody goddess? That'll keep you up at night. Here's a historical fact that's kind of delightful. Ancient Greek calendars were lunar. The months literally followed Selene's cycle, full to dark, bright to hidden. It's why month in English still shares roots with moon. Farmers planted by her glow, sailors timed their voyages by her rise and fall, and philosophers argued endlessly about whether her phases were predictable or just divine whimsy. And here's a quirky little tidbit. In some parts of Greece, the waxing crescent, the thin sliver after new moon, was thought of as Selene's smile, a sign of good fortune. In others, the same crescent meant she was turning away, withholding blessings, like she just read your group chat and left you on scene. Folklorists can't agree whether this dual symbolism came from regional traditions or just people projecting their own moods onto the sky. But that's the charm of it. You imagine standing on a hillside with a cluster of villagers, each person pointing upward, arguing whether the moon looks happy, sad, or like a slice of goat cheese. And you laugh, because honestly, if you've ever tried to get friends to agree on what cloud shapes look like, you know how impossible it is. Selene doesn't explain herself. She just drifts, round and radiant, then slowly fades, thinning until you think she's gone for good, only to return again. A cycle, endless, predictable yet mysterious. You watch her glide through phases, and it feels less like astronomy and more like the pacing of a story. Exposition, climax, quiet fade, and then the inevitable return of the heroine. Some scholars still debate whether ancient Greeks really saw Selene's phases as moods or just as handy time markers. Maybe both. After all, she's not just a clock in the sky. She's the one brushing silver paint on the fields, whispering into waves, coaxing owls to call and lovers to walk. She shifts because life itself shifts. And so, under her changing face, you keep walking. Her light bends around you, thinner now, a glowing arc that almost looks like a smile, or maybe a smirk. You pause for a moment, gazing upward, and there's a sound you almost swear you can hear, the steady rhythm of hooves against nothingness. Selene's chariot is coming, not a fiery spectacle like Helios, who drags the sun across the day, but a softer parade, a silver hush rolling over the horizon. 4 horses, or maybe 2, depending on which poet you ask, pull her gleaming carriage, their manes spilling light like milk poured across the dark. The Greeks described them with glowing names, Pyroes, Eos, Aethon, and Phlegon for the sun's team, but Selene's steeds are said to shimmer pale as mist. Imagine them, vast, gentle creatures, each hoofstep scattering stars like sparks. They're the original street lamps if you think about it, guiding travelers who'd otherwise stub toes on rocks and blame goblins. And here's a funny image. A goddess of moonlight, dressed in luminous robes, reins in hand, complaining under her breath like an Uber driver. Why does no one ever appreciate the night shift? Helios gets cheers, I get owls. You laugh quietly at the thought, but it makes her feel closer, like maybe divinity still has traffic jams. One historical fact worth noting, in art, Selene's chariot was often shown emerging from the ocean. Every night she rose from the waves of Oceanus, the great river said to encircle the world. Painters love to show her horses dripping seawater, shimmering like pearls under starlight. That's why many Greeks linked her light not only with time, but with tides, Selene tugging the sea just as gently as she tugged human hearts. There's also a curious tidbit. Some sources describe her horses as winged. That debate has carried on for centuries. Did Selene soar with feathered steeds, or did she simply glide gracefully across the heavens? Scholars argue, but honestly, why not both? If your job is lighting the night, you deserve a couple of flying horses as workplace perks. And here's the open scholarly quarrel. Was her chariot meant to mirror Helios's, a deliberate sibling balance of sun and moon? Or was it an older image borrowed from Near Eastern moon deities who also traveled in carriages? Folklorists can't agree, but you can picture her just fine either way. Reins in hand, hair streaming, horses shimmering like streaks of comet light. The sound of their trot is strangely soothing, a beat that carries you forward. You walk along an empty road, shadows dancing beside you, and it feels like the horse's rhythm is syncing with your own breath. Inhale, hoofbeat. Exhale, hoofbeat. The world slows into silver calm. And if you're not careful, you'll drift right into the kind of half-dream where those horses bend their glowing necks down, curious about you, snorting a mist of cool moonlight, before trotting on to pull their mistress further along her endless path. You walk a little further under that glowing sky, and the story takes a turn, because Selene is not just a goddess in transit, she is also hopelessly, eternally in love. And the object of her affection? A mortal shepherd named Endymion. Of all the cosmic romances, this one feels the most like a sleepy folk ballad whispered by firelight. Picture it, a quiet hillside in Asia Minor, sheep clustered like lumps of cream across the grass. Endymion lies on his back, staring upward, maybe counting constellations, maybe just too lazy to chase the sheep that wandered off. Then Selene sees him, and it's not just a passing glance, she falls hard. Imagine being so radiant you can light the seas, and then suddenly finding yourself blushing over a shepherd who probably hasn't bathed in a week. Love works like that, messy, inconvenient, and usually hilarious. There's a historical angle here. The story of Selene and Endymion was famous in antiquity, repeated in poems and temple carvings, but the details? Oh, they vary wildly. One version says Zeus granted Endymion eternal youth and sleep, so Selene could gaze on him forever. Another claims she cast the spell herself, unable to bear the thought of losing him to time. Scholars still argue whether Endymion chose this sleep or if he basically got cosmically benched for eternity. Consent apparently wasn't always the Greek god's strongest suit. And here's a quirky tidbit. In some tellings, Endymion wasn't a shepherd at all. He was a king of Elis, a hunter, or even an astronomer. Which makes sense. If you're staring at the sky all night, eventually you're going to catch the moon's attention. Still, the shepherd version is the one that stuck. There's something charming about Selene sneaking down from her chariot just to tuck a blanket around a snoring farmhand. As you imagine it, you feel the strangeness of this love. Half sweet, half haunting. Selene descends night after night, brushing his brow with kisses, whispering her silver secrets into his dreams. It's tender, but also a little lonely. She adores him, yet he never really wakes. It's like writing texts to someone who never replies, but in this case, the person is literally under a divine sleep contract. The debate lingers among classicists. Is this story a metaphor for the moon watching over sleeping Earth, or a tragic romance about desire that can never be fully mutual? You can almost hear the scholars bickering. It's about fertility. No, it's about astronomy. Meanwhile, Selene is up there like, guys, I just like the man's jawline, okay? You keep walking through the night, and the scene sharpens in your mind. There's Endymion, eternally young, eyes closed, chest rising and falling in slow rhythm, sheep grazing unconcerned nearby. And there's Selene, bending low, her glow spilling like milk across the hillside, illuminating a love story that is both too much and never enough. The image lingers with you, warm and a little melancholic, as the path continues under her silver watch. You wander on, and it strikes you how Selene's glow doesn't just belong to gods and shepherds. It sneaks into human lives in quieter, almost nosy ways. The cottages you pass along this dreamlike road seem bathed in her soft light, windows glimmering faintly even though no candles burn inside. She's like that one neighbor who peers in, not in a creepy way, but in a just making sure you're still breathing sort of way. Inside one cottage, a restless child turns over, mumbling in sleep, while Selene's beam cuts across the floor like a nightlight from the heavens. In another, an insomniac baker scratches his head at a lump of dough that refuses to rise, muttering something about moon madness. The Greeks believed moonlight could stir emotions, awaken passions, or unsettle minds. They even had a word for it, lunacy, from Luna, Selene's Roman counterpart. Sure, now we blame it on stress, caffeine, or scrolling TikTok too late, but admit it, the full moon still gets side-eye from modern folks. Historical fact, ancient physicians sometimes linked menstrual cycles directly to the moon's phases, treating Selene as a sort of celestial midwife. Farmers, too, scheduled sowing and harvesting by her silver rhythm. You imagine entire villages collectively pausing, tilting their heads, waiting for her glow to signal when to plant barley or when to hold festivals. And here's the quirky tidbit. There were laws in some Greek cities against doing certain kinds of work during a full moon, because people thought the goddess was watching more closely then. It's like when your boss hovers behind your desk and suddenly you're hyper-aware of every keystroke. Folklorists still debate whether these restrictions were religious superstition or just convenient excuses for a night off. But the idea that moonlight can keep you awake? That hasn't gone anywhere. Ask nurses, bartenders, or anyone with blackout curtains. Even science admits the body's melatonin gets a little fussy when the moon is bright. You picture Selene drifting by, shrugging innocently like, "Don't blame me, I'm just doing my job." You smile to yourself, noticing how the night around you feels alive with her influence. Cats pad more boldly across rooftops. Lovers stroll with fingers brushing. Someone, somewhere, writes a poem they'll regret sharing in the morning. All because Selene refuses to dim her glow just to let the world sleep peacefully. You walk on, the cottage is fading behind, Selene's silver still tugging gently at your own thoughts. A little restless, yes, but also oddly soothed, as though her light has become the blanket you didn't realize you needed. The path bends, and you notice a cluster of stone benches on a hilltop, silhouetted against Selene's glow. A few figures linger there, bearded, robed, and gesturing wildly with their hands. Ancient philosophers, always watching, always arguing. And what about? The moon, of course. One points with a staff, declaring with absolute confidence that Selene is a goddess who drives a chariot nightly. Another waves him off, insisting she's nothing more than a glowing rock reflecting sunlight. A third chimes in, suggesting she's made of fire. Honestly, it sounds less like a scholarly debate and more like a modern comment section under a science video. Here's the historical fact. Greek thinkers like Anaxagoras dared to claim that the moon was actually a solid body, not divine, and that its light came from the sun. Radical stuff for the time. He was even accused of impiety for it, because telling people their beloved moon goddess is just a rock is basically the ancient equivalent of saying Santa isn't real. And here's the quirky tidbit. Aristotle believed the moon was halfway between Earth and stars, made of a mysterious fifth element, ether. Not quite divine, not quite mortal, sort of like the VIP section of the cosmos. To him, Selene's glow wasn't magic so much as a natural order, though you can imagine Aristotle still checking the sky like a kid trying to figure out how the magician pulled the rabbit out of the hat. The scholarly debate, of course, continues. Was Selene purely a goddess, or was she always partly an allegory for the physical moon? Classicists bicker about whether people worshipped her as divine first, then rationalized her into astronomy, or if she was just moonlight personified from the start. Nobody agrees. But really, doesn't it feel nicer to imagine a goddess brushing silver onto the world instead of just physics doing math? You chuckle as you pass the group of philosophers, their voices fading into the night. They're still arguing, still scribbling diagrams into the dust, still convinced that one day their theories will finally stick. Meanwhile, above them, Selene rides on, unbothered, proving all of them right and wrong at the same time. And as you walk, you think, maybe the beauty of Selene isn't in choosing between goddess and rock. Maybe it's that she's managed to stay both, depending on who's looking up. The air grows cooler as the path leads you toward the shore. The sound of waves reaches your ears, steady, rhythmic, almost in time with your breathing. And there, stretching across the dark water, is Selene's reflection, a shimmering silver path laid gently over the sea. It looks like a road just for you, as if you could step out and walk across the surface without sinking. That glimmer has always captivated people. Sailors used it as a guide, steering their ships by her beam when stars were hidden. Lovers walked beaches, hand in hand, believing her light blessed their union. And poets, of course, couldn't resist the metaphor. Selene laying a bridge of silver between earth and sky. You almost wonder if she ever gets tired of the comparisons. Yes, I'm a shining ribbon. Heard it before. Here's a historical fact. In Greek art, Selene was often shown rising directly from the ocean at nightfall. The idea was that she began her journey by pulling her horses out of the waves, dripping salt water and pearls before ascending into the heavens. The connection between moon and sea was not lost on the ancients. Though they didn't know about gravity, they knew tides seemed to listen to her. And here's a quirky tidbit. In some coastal villages, people would leave offerings at the water's edge during a full moon. Little cakes shaped like crescents, jars of honey, even fish. The belief was that Selene's light dipped into the water and she'd taste the gifts through her reflection. Folklorists still debate whether these rituals were dedicated directly to Selene or whether they were hybrid customs blending her with local sea deities. Either way, you can picture some fishermen muttering, "Better feed the moon, or she'll keep my nets empty." The scholarly debate lingers too. Was Selene truly tied to tides in the Greek imagination, or is that a modern back projection of our own knowledge of lunar pull? Scholars argue both sides, but standing here, the water glittering like molten silver, it's easy to see why people believed she had a hand in it. You take a step closer, and the reflection trembles as the waves lap at your feet. It almost feels like an invitation. Selene offering you a quiet passage, a private road where the world grows hushed and every ripple carries a secret. You don't take it, of course. You just smile at the idea, letting the rhythm of sea and moon lull your mind into that soft place between wakefulness and dream. The road carries you inland again, winding through groves and meadows. But Selene still follows, high above, her light spilling through branches and painting silver across every leaf. You pause when you hear voices, different from the philosophers earlier, softer this time, like a circle of storytellers. And indeed, as you draw closer, you realize people from faraway lands have gathered to share their own moon tales, each one holding Selene's reflection in a new shape. From the east comes the tale of the moon rabbit, pounding an eternal mortar on the lunar surface. Some say it's grinding rice for immortality, others swear it's making medicine. You glance up at Selene, and sure enough, if you squint, the shadows could be long ears and a tiny paw. It's a sweet thought. While she drives her horses, a rabbit keeps her company, like a celestial sidekick. From the Andes, you hear whispers of a serpent who swallowed the moon and caused an eclipse. Villagers would shout, bang drums, even throw spears into the air to scare it away. The serpent always retreated, of course, and Selene's glow returned. Imagine the relief, like watching your Wi-Fi reconnect after hours of buffering. And then a storyteller from the Arctic tells you about the sun and moon as siblings. The moon, sometimes chased, sometimes fleeing, always shifting roles with the sun in an endless game. That one feels familiar, almost echoing Selene and Helios, family squabbles stretched across the sky. Here's the historical fact. Greek sailors weren't the only ones reading her glow as a compass. Polynesian navigators used moon phases alongside stars to chart long voyages. For them, Selene wasn't just divine light, she was a literal travel guide. And here's a quirky tidbit. In Japanese folklore, the moon is home to a princess, Kaguya Hime, who was sent back to her celestial family after being found in a glowing bamboo stalk. Imagine Selene peeking down at Earth thinking, I've got rabbits and royalty living rent-free on my face. The scholarly debate? Whether these global myths developed independently, each culture staring up and spinning its own tale, or whether traders and travelers carried the stories across oceans. Folklorists still argue. But standing here, you feel the connection. No matter where people live, they can't resist looking up, squinting, and seeing more than a rock. They see Selene, or her cousins, or her shadows. The circle of voices fades as you walk on, but their stories linger. Selene's silver light isn't just Greek. It's woven into countless legends, and tonight you feel them layering over you like quilts. Different fabrics, same warmth. Your path straightens into a quiet valley, where fields stretch in tidy rows under Selene's steady glow. The air smells faintly of earth and hay, and you realize you're walking through the ancient calendar of farmers. To them, Selene wasn't just pretty scenery, she was a timekeeper, the silver clock hanging above the world. Every phase mattered. When Selene was waxing, crops were sown, believing her growing light would bless the sprouting seeds. When she waned, harvests were gathered, her shrinking glow mirroring the cycle of cutting down what had grown. It's a rhythm you can almost feel under your feet. Plant, grow, reap, rest, like the heartbeat of the land itself. Historical fact, the word month comes directly from the moon. The ancient Greeks measured time by lunar cycles, each month beginning with the new moon. Festivals, markets, even political meetings were scheduled according to Selene's glow. The idea of the moon as a cosmic calendar wasn't just metaphor, it was practical. People lived by it, sometimes more than by the sun. Here's a quirky tidbit. In Athens, debt payments were often due on the new moon of the month, which sounds official until you imagine everyone squinting up at the sky, arguing, "No, that's still just a sliver. I've got one more night before I pay you." Folklorists suggest this constant lunar accounting might explain why Greeks developed such detailed observations of her phases, not just for farming, but for their wallets. And here's the scholarly debate. Was Selene herself worshipped as the patroness of agriculture, or was she more of a convenient marker that farmers tied rituals to? Some argue she was vital to fertility cults. Others claim she was just the backdrop for Demeter and other gods to take the credit. The jury is still out. You pause, watching moonlight ripple over barley stalks. The fields look alive, whispering under the silver glow, each plant tilted upward, as if straining to catch her attention. You think of all the generations who tilted their heads the same way, measuring their lives by her phases. Selene doesn't just light the night. She carries the weight of seasons, births, and harvests. And as you wander through the fields, you feel as though you're walking inside her great glowing clock. The fields give way to a ridge, and tucked just beyond it, you stumble onto stones, ruins softened by moss, half buried in the soil. At first, they look like nothing more than broken walls, but as your eyes adjust under Selene's light, you realize they form a circle, an altar. Once, long ago, people gathered here to call her name. You kneel near one of the crumbled pillars, and you can almost picture it restored. Garlands of flowers strung across marble, bowls of milk or honey laid out as offerings, the smell of incense twisting into the night air. Selene may not have had temples as grand as Zeus or Athena, but scattered altars like this prove she had her worshippers, quiet devotion in small corners under her gaze. Here's the historical fact. Selene had no huge pan-Hellenic cult, no massive temple in Athens, but inscriptions and archaeological traces show shrines dedicated to her in rural places, often linked with fertility and childbirth. People saw her as a goddess of cycles, not just in the sky, but in bodies, in fields, in daily rhythms. And here's a quirky tidbit. Some altars were shared between Selene and Hecate, the goddess of crossroads and magic. Imagine the two of them sharing an altar like roommates, Selene bringing light, Hecate bringing torches and dogs. Folklorists still debate whether worshippers saw them as sisters, partners, or simply complementary forces of night. The scholarly debate here is whether Selene's role as a worshipped goddess was ever strong in her own right, or if she was overshadowed by Artemis. Some claim Selene was always a secondary figure, folded into lunar rituals for other deities. Others argue she was once more central, her cult fading as mythology shifted. You can almost hear the academics arguing, their voices carried faintly by the night breeze, while the ruins stay quiet, keeping their secrets. You walk around the altar, tracing a fingertip over faint carvings, crescents, horses, stars. You imagine villagers kneeling here centuries ago, whispering prayers for safe childbirth, a bountiful harvest, or simply a restful night. And for a moment, the ruins don't feel empty at all. They feel as though Selene still lingers, brushing her glow gently across the stone, accepting offerings long since vanished. The path continues on, but you carry the hush of that sacred space with you, as though some of the prayers are still echoing in your ears. The ruins fade into shadow as you move onward, and soon the ground shifts beneath your feet, less earth, more rock. The air feels cooler, damp even, and you hear the faint rush of water. Selene's light reveals a stream curling across the path, silver ribbons tumbling over dark stones. It whispers like a secret, as though it's carrying messages from the goddess herself. Water has always been tied to Selene. Her reflection trembles across the stream's surface, a second moon rippling in miniature. You crouch to watch it, and suddenly the idea clicks. Just as the moon pulls the tides of the sea, so too might her magic be hiding in this little brook. Here's your historical anchor. Ancient Greeks noticed the connection between the moon and tides long before modern science explained gravity. Writers like Aristotle and Pliny hinted at the relationship, though often in vague, poetic terms. To them, Selene's pull wasn't physics, it was divine influence, the goddess stirring oceans with her silver rains. Now, the quirky tidbit. There's an old folk belief that if you wash your face in moonlit water, you'll be blessed with beauty, which is basically the ancient Greek version of a TikTok skincare hack, except instead of retinol, you're just dunking your head in cold, glowing water and hoping Selene notices. And the scholarly debate: did Greeks truly personify the moon's tidal power as Selene's magic, or did they simply observe a correlation and fold it into her mythology? Some argue her control over water is a late association, absorbed into her lore as coastal communities emphasized the tides. Others insist it was always implicit, that if she could steer horses across the sky, why not waves across the sea? You dip your hand into the stream, letting the water slip coolly between your fingers. For a moment, you imagine Selene reaching back, her silvery touch mingling with yours through the current. The brook hums on, carrying its secret rhythm, and you stand again, reminded that her power isn't only above your head, it flows beneath your feet, too. As you leave, you glance back, and her reflection still wavers on the water's skin, as though she's watching you twice, once from the sky, and once from the stream. The path narrows again, climbing toward a ridge where the land suddenly opens. From here, you can see everything: the curve of hills, the hush of forests, and beyond, the ocean stretching like liquid obsidian. Selene hangs directly above it, her light spilling across the water in a shimmering road, as though she's laid a bridge of silver just for you. This site has a name: a moon path. Sailors once swore that if you followed it long enough, you'd reach the goddess herself. Of course, that assumes your boat didn't sink first, a minor but important detail they tended to gloss over in the romance of the idea. Here's the historical nugget. In coastal Greek cities, fishermen and sailors prayed to Selene for safe voyages. They believed her light could steer them clear of rocks, or at least keep them company on endless star-strewn waters. Her presence was both map and companion. Now, the quirky tidbit. Some old stories warned that staring too long at the moon path could drive you mad, because it tricks your eyes into believing there's a solid road across the sea. Think of it as nature's optical illusion, a divine prank courtesy of Selene. The scholarly debate here: whether the moon path was seen primarily as guidance or as temptation. Was Selene leading sailors safely home, or luring them into her domain, like a quieter, more glamorous siren? Ancient texts don't agree, and scholars still toss this question back and forth like academic beach balls. You sit for a moment on the ridge, the salty breeze brushing your face, and the moon path shimmering like a secret invitation. It feels both comforting and haunting. If you stepped into a boat now, would you be led safely across, or would you vanish into Selene's silver trail, never to return? You don't test it, of course. You stay on land, tucked safely into the hum of the earth. But that vision stays with you, etched into your memory. A glowing road laid across the world's vast water. A promise, or a warning, depending on how much faith you dare to place in the goddess's hand. You leave the ridge behind, the image of that silver road lingering in your mind like a half-sweet, half-haunting dream. The trail descends into a wide meadow, where grasses sway in soft ripples under Selene's glow. You pause, noticing how each blade seems outlined in silver, every shadow drawn sharper than daylight could manage. It's in this meadow that you come across a circle of stones, not enormous monoliths, more like waist-high guardians, arranged in a pattern too deliberate to be chance. Selene's light spills across them, and suddenly the place feels charged, as though the air is holding its breath. Here's your historical anchor. The Greeks weren't exactly Stonehenge enthusiasts, but they did practice moonlit rituals in open spaces. Many shrines to Selene, Artemis, or Hecate were set outdoors, where the moon could act as both lamp and witness. Priests and priestesses would time offerings with the lunar cycle, treating each phase as a kind of divine calendar. Now, the quirky tidbit. Some rural Greek communities believed that if you danced in a moonlit meadow, Selene might bless your crops or curse them if you stepped out of rhythm, which basically makes her the original tough dance judge. Forget about "so you think you can dance." This was more like "so you think you can grow barley." And the scholarly debate. Were moonlit dances actual religious rituals, or were they just communal celebrations later dressed up as sacred? Folklorists argue over whether villagers truly believed Selene attended their midnight circles, or whether it was simply a convenient excuse to gather, move, and laugh beneath the stars. You imagine the meadow alive with figures, twirling in gowns and tunics, their shadows spinning like dark partners across the grass. The laughter is soft. The songs rise faintly. And above it all, Selene watches, her silver reins slack for just a moment as she lets joy unfold below. Standing at the edge of the stone circle, you feel the temptation to step in, to sway with the rhythm of wind and crickets. And though your dance is clumsy, 2 left feet under moonlight, it feels right. Selene's glow smooths over your missteps, as though she's less interested in perfection and more delighted that you moved at all. The meadow gives way to a quiet slope, where the grass softens into moss and the air grows cooler. You follow a trickling stream that catches Selene's light like liquid silver, winding down the hillside as though it too is tracing her path. The sound of water soothes you, gentle, repetitive, like a lullaby hummed by the earth itself. The stream leads you toward a grove of tall, dark cypress trees. Their trunks stretch like pillars, their tops weaving into a lace-work canopy that frames the sky. Selene peers through the branches, her light broken into fragments, dappling the ground with shifting silver. It feels like stepping into a temple, not built by human hands, but by time and quiet devotion. Here's your historical anchor. The Greeks often planted cypress near tombs and sacred spaces, believing the trees stood between worlds. Some shrines to Selene were rumored to sit among groves like this, where mortals could feel closest to her watchful gaze. The trees themselves became symbols of mourning, of immortality, of eternal vigil under the moon. Now, the quirky tidbit. Ancient dream books, yes, they had those, sometimes claimed that if you slept beneath a cypress grove under a full moon, you might dream of Selene herself. Or, more ominously, you might wake up with mysterious scratches as though the goddess had touched you, which is equal parts sacred and mildly horrifying. And the scholarly debate. Were these groves true sanctuaries for Selene, or were they retroactively linked to her because of their nocturnal eeriness? Some argue the connection came from later mythographers stitching her into older earthbound cults. Others insist she always belonged here, haunting the threshold between the living and the timeless. You walk deeper into the grove, each step cushioned by moss, each breath steeped in stillness. For a moment, you almost expect Selene to descend, brushing aside the branches like a curtain, her silver gown rustling as she steps down to greet you. The night holds its breath, and even your own pulse feels too loud. But the goddess remains above, serene and distant, leaving you with nothing more and nothing less than the quiet gift of her light. The grove thins, and you find yourself at the edge of a small hilltop clearing. The view opens wide, revealing the horizon painted in muted shades of blue and silver. Selene hovers low now, her chariot gliding with a grace that feels slower, softer, as though even she grows weary before dawn. You sink onto the grass, the earth cool beneath you, the sky vast above. The night has carried you far, through myths, through whispers of rituals, through shadows of gods and mortals alike. Yet here, in this final pause, everything seems to hush. The crickets settle into their steady rhythm. The breeze stirs gently, almost like a hand smoothing down a blanket. Historical anchor. The Greeks marked transitions with hymns, soft closing verses sung to honor the gods as they departed. Evening hymns to Selene were especially tender, praising her for guarding the night and promising her return when the cycle began anew. Quirky tidbit. Some communities believed if you whispered a secret to the moon before dawn, Selene might carry it across the sky and keep it safe. Essentially, she doubled as a celestial diary. No locks, just lunar discretion. And the debate. Scholars still question how distinct Selene truly was from Artemis or Hecate. Were they three separate goddesses with overlapping domains, or different reflections of the same divine feminine? The lines blur, just as the moon's edges blur when clouds drift across her face. You lie back, eyes following Selene's path as it stretches westward. It feels as though you've walked with her all night, step for silver step, and now you're allowed to rest in her glow one last time. The silence thickens, words grow unnecessary, and the night folds itself gently around you, patient, protective, endless. And so the journey softens, as though the world itself begins to exhale. You rest here on the hillside, and everything slows, the pulse of the earth beneath you, the shimmer of the stars above, even the quiet, silver rhythm of Selene's chariot drawing away toward the horizon. The night no longer asks you to move, or to think, or to carry any story at all. It only asks you to breathe. Each breath becomes longer now, drawn in gently, released with ease. The meadow, the grove, the stream, the ridges, they all drift further behind you, fading like dreams do when morning edges close. And yet, instead of loss, there is comfort in the fading. You know the moon will rise again tomorrow, carrying her silver path across the dark, steady as the tide, quiet as the turning of hours. The grass beneath you softens into something that feels like a bed. The whispering breeze becomes the soft hum of a fan, and Selene's light, pale and tender, begins to blur into the darkness behind your eyes. You let go of the details, the stones, the myths, the scholars still argue over. All that remains is the stillness, the safety, the endless stretch of night that has no urgency, no expectation, no edge. Your body grows heavier, yet lighter, as though you are both rooted and floating. The world folds around you in quiet assurance. You are safe, you are at rest. You are exactly where you are meant to be. So now, Let your thoughts grow distant. Let the path dissolve. Let the night hold you until sleep takes you gently, completely, without effort. Good night, dreamer. Sweet dreams.